Hello everyone, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, Preparing for the Future of Work. I'm delighted to be joined today by Carl Nicholson from our Digital Innovation Division, Synaptek, to share with you what the future of work means for us all. Before we get started, I'd just like to take a couple of minutes for some introductions. So I am Adam Turner, Business Development Manager at Spherica. We're an IT services company with a difference. We deliver technology that challenges the status quo, and we've spent more than 10 years now evolving our business to offer much more than your traditional IT services. And we do this by putting IT right at the heart of the business. One of the things I think we do really well is immerse ourselves in our clients' businesses so we can get a real insight into the challenges that they face and use technology to solve problems and improve their operations. It was really this insight that led us to the decision to create a new digital innovation division dedicated to delivering better ways of working using new and disruptive technology. So on that note, I'd like to introduce Carl Nicholson. He's the CIO of Synaptek, who's here to show you how intelligent automation is shaping the future of work, and you'll hear more from Carl later.
Hello,
so
everybody.
at Spherica, we work with a range of clients across numerous sectors, and what I find particularly interesting is that despite the fact that they cover a multitude of industries, they often all face the same challenges, regardless of whether they're a train operator, a financial services company, or a high street retailer. And we've delivered everything from consulting and strategy development to fully managed IT operations, also along with some pretty cool intelligent automation projects as well. Just one last thing to mention before we move on. The webinar system gives you the opportunity to ask questions. So we've left some time at the end to cover these off, but also we'll be asking for your input as well in a couple of polls. We've got 3 actually throughout the session. So look forward to hearing your points of view as well as we move on. So let's get started. So in the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to cover off how we're already witnessing the most significant changes to how we are working, and we'll review the priorities and pitfalls in preparing for the future of work. I've popped this quote up here. We really like this because it's more relevant now than it ever has been before. The future of work consists of learning and living. The last 2 decades have brought unprecedented change, and technology has evolved into so many aspects of our daily lives, whether we're asking Alexa to play us a tune, using the latest weather apps to avoid a downpour, or just wondering how our social media is filled with so many ads for things that we were just chatting about. We're embracing new technology every day, often without even realizing it. We've changed habits of a lifetime because we've seen the benefits that technology brings to our everyday lives. And it's exactly this approach we need to be taking when considering the role that technology should be playing in our working lives too. To truly harness the power of technology to make our working lives better, we need to adapt to a future of lifelong learning where we continually learn new skills as technology evolves. There is, of course, the elephant in the room when we start talking about the future of work. We know the press love to talk about how robots are taking over our jobs in reference to how technology and automation is changing businesses. The reality that we see is that new technology complements our work by automating mundane, repetitive tasks, freeing up valuable time so that we humans can focus on those tasks that require, well, a human touch. With the right digital strategy in place, we'll all have more time to focus on innovation, making a positive impact using skills that robots can't replicate, like our imagination, our emotional intelligence, determination and compassion. We may actually even find we've got more time to come up for air. So as I mentioned before, we've got a quick poll for you. So this question here, does your business consider technology a competitive advantage? So I'm hoping that you can see that. If you can't see it, if you come out of full screen view, you should be able to see the questions in the menu bar there as well. So we'll collect these and then we'll feed these back towards the end of the session as well. So if you wouldn't mind just casting your vote for us, that would be great. So now I want to take a more detailed look at what's driving the future of work. Well, Today's consumers are more digitally savvy than they ever have been before, and the likes of Amazon and Uber have shaped a nation of consumers that expect fast, personalised experiences, often with little human interaction. As consumers, our expectations are high, and if businesses don't meet these, they face the real risk of disappearing forever, along with so many long-established brands that we've seen fail in recent years. Not only this, but the customer journey and decisions to buy are no longer controlled by businesses. Instead, consumers turn to influencers, peer reviews, and use the wealth of information available online to help them decide what to buy. To have a fighting chance in this new battleground, customer experience is everything, and businesses have to fundamentally change how they work to deliver the best experience, from how they communicate and interact with customers to how they deliver services round the clock, 365 days a year. The ones doing it well are the early adopters of a technology-first approach to business. Just consider that it took online retailer ASOS just 17 years to surpass Marks & Spencer's market valuation, and they did this by getting their digital strategy right from the off. Next, rather like consumers, employees expect modern working environments and the best technology to do their jobs. One of the biggest changes in employee expectations is for flexible working. Technology makes it easy for us to achieve the same level of work from home as we would in an office environment. As someone myself who works from home regularly, I've seen firsthand how much flexibility this gives me. I have less interruptions, I no longer spend hours each week commuting, which works much better for me personally, and I actually think it allows me to give more back to the business as well. So demands for flexible working, part-time roles, contract work are going to continue to grow as businesses and workers recognise the benefits. So we need to make sure that we have the technology and the culture to make this transition easy. And as I've mentioned, we've witnessed an unprecedented rate of change in the last couple of decades, and there's no sign of this slowing down. Predicting what customers need isn't as simple as asking them anymore, because quite simply customers may not know what they need next. The most disruptive businesses we see today have been born out of customer frustrations. Just look at the growth of businesses like Airbnb, Purple Bricks, Uber Eats. All of these met a need that address consumer frustrations in long-established industries that just haven't moved with the times. We need to become experts in understanding what our customers need and not be constrained by what is available today. Just look for solutions that help address current pain points and future needs, then find a technology solution that can meet them. And the quote I've got on there, Steve Jobs put it, you have to start with the customer experience and work backwards towards the technology. And then lastly, using technology to automate menial tasks allows companies to scale without needing to always increase headcount. Productivity is increased, cost efficiencies are reduced, and businesses become more agile. But using technology to support processes throughout business can come with its risks. Always ask yourself the question, what happens if things go wrong? We only have to look at the example in the press from last week with TSB spectacularly failing to manage the risk of moving to a new data platform. The end result, millions of customers were locked out of their accounts. It's difficult to imagine a business like that not having procedures in place to thoroughly test before rolling out, but they didn't, and worryingly, neither do many more. As technology becomes the foundations on which businesses run, there's no room for corner cutting. IT leaders must be central to strategic decisions and drive the design and planning of solutions, not just the implementation itself. IT teams need to be enablers with a deep understanding of business priorities. This is something we've made central to our services, and I know that Carl will be showing you some interesting examples of how to reduce the risk through using some of the clever technology when he comes to his demonstration. So just before I pass on to Carl, I wanted to cover a few things that we do differently actually at Spherica. So as I mentioned, we're not your typical IT services provider. We like to challenge the status quo, and we like to make work easier for our customers. And we do this firstly by putting end users at the heart of everything we do, because at the end of the day, no matter what business you're in, you're delivering customer experiences. So the customer has to be front of mind in any transformation plan. And then secondly, in traditional IT departments, the development team, these are the guys who are writing code, and the IT operations team often work independently, with operations raising tickets and developers executing them. We were very quick to recognise the need for these people to work much more closely together, and we do this using what we call a DevOps approach. By embedding developers within our operations team, everyone becomes focused on the same goal, and tickets can be dealt with much more quickly, which delivers a better service to users and saves us all valuable time. And then lastly, just in case I haven't mentioned this enough already, the future of work is all about identifying opportunities to automate low-value tasks to make work easier for everyone. So this is something that we're absolutely obsessed with. And as it says on the slide, just that last point there, we see ourselves at Spherica, first and foremost, we're a customer service company. We just happen to deliver IT services. So again, just before I hand over to Carl, hopefully that poll will have just popped up in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. So we have another poll here for you. Do you know how your business could benefit from automation? So again, be really grateful if you could cast your vote on that one. And I shall hand you over to Carl to continue. So Carl, over to you.
Adam, thanks very much, and thanks for the great introduction. As Adam's already mentioned, I'm Carl Nicholson, the CIO of Spherica's digital innovation division called Synaptek. I'm going to explain how Synaptek came about to start with. Essentially, it's a business born out of frustration. Our frustration as IT service providers, whereby service desks, your traditional tier 1, 2 and 3 model of IT support hasn't really changed for about 30 years. So I'm sure you've all experienced this. You have a problem at work with your IT, you call a number or you send an email, someone answers the phone and you tell them 1,000,001 things about you. You tell them who you are, what asset you're trying to use, what your problem is, what's not working. You know, they'll ask you questions like, have you turned the computer off and back on? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? And we think this isn't very good. So we set about trying to design a system whereby us as IT service providers should know all of those questions already. So we should know who you are. We should know what computer you're on. And ideally, we should know what your problem is before you've had to pick up the phone and tell us that you have a problem. And that all sounds really easy, but it's actually very difficult to deliver on paper. So we found some technology, container-based technology, that enables us to essentially create workflow between systems to deliver this experience to users. And we won't dive into that any more deeply yet, but we'll start at the top level. So let's carry on. So at Synaptek, we're on a mission to supercharge the world of work through the power of technology and be a force for good in the workplace. Now, I appreciate you're probably sat there saying, well, this is really easy. I'm just going to go and buy some shiny new tech and I'll be able to deliver the future of work to my people. Unfortunately, it's not that simple at all, and we'll try and address some of the pitfalls and problems that businesses have as they go through this digital transformation later on in the presentation. We're just going to do some jargon busting because there's nothing worse than sat on a webinar listening to some techie guy talk rubbish and you don't understand what it's on about. So firstly, robotic process automation, or RPA, as you may have heard it referred to, essentially mimics human behavior and is very basic and has a limited rule-based workflow. So when we refer to RPA, we're typically talking about technology that quite literally mimics the button presses that a person who would typically do the job sat in front of a computer would do. It's not very intelligent. It can go wrong, but for certain systems, RPA is absolutely the right way to go because you don't have modern applications whereby you can connect things like APIs and stuff like that. So when we do have APIs and clever ways to integrate technologies together, we use intelligent automation, which essentially simulates human intelligence and uses algorithms and learns and predicts outcomes based on the connections between those applications. So there's two types of automation there, and we like to deal with intelligent automation, but there are systems and processes that we can't, and we have to use RPA for those types of processes. In the AI space, everyone's talking about AI at the moment. It seems to be quite the marketing buzzword. I just wanted to explain here that we see AI as having two distinct branches, and that's narrow and general. So typically, most of the things that you guys will have come into contact with AI-wise today, your things like your Alexas and your Siris of the world, we refer to them as narrow. They can only function or understand a narrow set of information or inputs. They're not what we would call a general AI, whereas essentially something that completely mimics human understanding and knowledge. So for instance, if you ask Siri something in the wrong format, it won't understand it and it won't be able to sort of crunch that information and provide you with an answer. Whereas a general AI, which tends to be very complex and very expensive, you could have a conversation to like a human being, and it ideally should never return, "I'm sorry, I don't understand this, please search the web to find out the answer," type of thing. And ML is another marketing buzzword just now. So machine learning is a system when it processes large amounts of data to learn how to carry out specific tasks. So typically, we apply ML to AI to allow the system to learn how to do things at a very basic level. And a good example of fusing the two together is something called a neural network. I'm going to give you an example of a neural network in a moment that is something I use on a daily basis and I didn't even know I was using. But essentially, this is when we get a system to think like a person. And I'm not going to dwell on that anymore. I'm just going to give you the example because it will help explain it. So I didn't know this, but in the latest iPhone, there is a neural network that, for instance, every time you open the camera app, what the phone does is it starts capturing data. So before you press the shutter button, it's captured between 8 and 12 images. When you press the button, the system, the neural network, looks at all of these images it's captured, so there's 8 and 12 images, looks at when you press the shutter, and it tries to best understand what it is you're trying to take a picture of, and then grabs the sort of best pixels across all of those images and puts it together to create the image that it shows you as the photo that you've taken. And I think that's pretty mind-blowing. And the very fact that it does this in my phone and I've not really been aware of it is pretty amazing. So there's a neural network in your iPhone, which was news to me. So let's talk about business. We think there's two main issues affecting companies today, and that's a technology gap and a social gap. So the technology gap being that IT as a function needs to modernize and change the way that it operates to enable this sort of outstanding customer experience that we talked about earlier. I don't think the current model that some businesses have in place of monolithic systems, silos, etc., is really going to cut the mustard. It's not going to enable us to deliver that customer experience going forward. And the second is a social gap. In some businesses, IT is seen as a blocker to innovation. I've experienced this myself. I don't know if you have within your business, but how many times have you heard the phrase, well, we won't tell IT, we'll just do it and we'll let them know after? Because in some companies, the rules and way that the business is set up isn't geared for innovation at all. It's designed to keep the lights on, and it's designed to keep IT happy. And what we see is people essentially doing shadow IT to get projects over the line and then telling IT about it afterwards. We think that approach is bad, and if we can work in a way that benefits the business and IT, I think you get a better solution at the end of it. So there's a few pitfalls here. One is lack of strategy in general. So often you'll see businesses that just go buy a platform to do a thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Lack of engagement. They only ask a small subset of people what it is that the business wants and needs, and they don't necessarily work across multiple departments of the business. So you might buy something and it's absolutely outstanding for sales, But actually, if you'd have spoken to HR, they've got a system that's really similar, and you could have bought one system that kind of does both, but nobody speaks to HR. And last but not least is data and platform sprawl. Again, we'll talk about that with my work example in a second. Okay, we have a poll. The poll we have now is platform sprawl an issue for your business? Apologies for my coughing, folks. I am dying of man flu at the moment. Okay, so here's our example. This is my company, my fictional company. It's made up of about 800 employees. And as you can see, we've got some departments on our screen. What we tend to find in each of these departments is a core platform that is used. This is quite a modern business. It's been through what we'd call traditional business transformation. Everything's cloud-based. But the problem is with these platforms, they don't do everything. So what happens is, for instance, Salesforce doesn't do payments, doesn't do e-commerce, so we end up buying even more platforms. And the problem with all of this is none of this stuff talks to each other. It's a single management interface for each of these platforms, which means we've got 41 platforms to manage, assuming IT even knows about all 41 of them in the first place. 41 sets of separate reporting that some kind of service delivery manager has to make sense of. 41 platforms that we need to access control. So every time someone leaves the business, we need to provide access or remove access to all 41 of those platforms. None of this stuff talks to each other, so we're having to constantly copy data in and out of platform A to platform B. There's a huge potential for data overlap, so you've got doubled up data all over the place. It's also a terrible user experience because you've constantly got to jump between all these different platforms to do whatever it is you need to do for your business. And I'm sure there's hundreds of stats out there that back this up, but when you context switch between things, you lose productivity. So in our world, it makes more sense to join this all up so that we can automate some of these actions. And we'll talk about how we do that now. Synaptek sits in the center of all of these platforms, and we provide workflow automation solutions to deliver outcomes. So here we have some use cases. So the first one we have here is the customer experience. Just wait for the load. So here on the left-hand side of our screen, we've got our requests coming in. So structured data could be something like an internal user portal, or perhaps a retail portal where we go into there, we select the type of thing we want to do. So I want to process a customer return, or I want to create a new IT user, a new starter, etc. And we refer to that as structured data. So we know what that form is before it lands to us. And then underneath that, we've also got unstructured data. So this could be things like emails, text messages, or even phone calls. What we then do is pass these through an AI content classifier, and that's a really fancy word for basically saying we give this to a computer and we ask the computer to try and understand what it is that the user is asking for. If we understand what they're asking for, we create a ticket. And in this example, we've used ServiceNow, but it could be any sort of ticketing platform. It could be Zendesk, it could be whatever it is that your business needs to use. And we create a ticket. So based on the information that came in on the left-hand side of the screen, we've understood what the user is asking for, we've created the ticket, and then autonomously we've gone off on the right-hand side of the screen to go and do the doing. So an example could be that we've requested a new user to start in the business, we've understood what it is the manager is asking for, and then we've got our automation to go away and create user accounts in all the platforms on the right-hand side. And that's great. So even if we could only apply this to, say, 20% of our service desk tickets, that's 20% of stuff that nobody has to touch anymore. It just happens, the user gets what they need, and everyone's had a better experience all around. Because it's been done through automation, it's repeatable, which means if anything goes wrong or we're not happy with the process, we change it once and it's updated everywhere. Also, if the content classifier doesn't understand what the user wants, it still passes it to a person, and we ask a person what is it that they're after. So we still have to use a service desk operative at that point, but then what we can do is go back and update the content classifier so that next time the system understands what it is the user wants without having to back it out to a person. So once we've understood what it is they want, we still go into our ticketing tool, and then the automation takes over and goes off and does the doing. This is actually an employee onboarding example. So here we've got our two main platforms, which is Workday, which is our human capital management system, basically an HR system, and we've got ServiceNow as our ticketing tool. So we hire a new user in Workday, that then gets passed to ServiceNow. ServiceNow goes off into a collaboration hub, which in this example is Slack, Teams, or Outlook. It's gone and asked the manager, hey, this new person is starting your team next week. Is this correct? Is this their job title? Manager goes back and says, yes, it is. Back into ServiceNow, which then kicks off an automation to go and create their user identity, so their AD account or their Okta account, to provide them their company sort of log on and their credentials. Because we've already confirmed with the manager who they are, what job they're doing, etc., we can then go and provision their access into the relevant platforms that they need access to do their job. So it goes away, creates those accounts, updates the ticket, and then last but not least, it comes back and it sends comms out to the person who raised the ticket in the first place, typically the hiring manager, to say, yep, your new user's ready to go, I've created all these accounts, and they're ready to start next week, type of thing. The benefit to you as a customer, if you were to put this in place, is when the person leaves the business, it's the same process but in reverse to remove access to all those relevant platforms based on your business rules, etc. This is an interesting example. So let's imagine someone's just resigned. This is Sally. And the first thing that happens is Sally, we get a notification from Box to tell us that she's downloading vast amounts of data, very unusual behavior. We're talking gigs and gigs of stuff. So the workflow picks this up. It says, oh, that's strange. It creates a ticket. And in this example, it's Zendesk. What we then get the automation to do is go into Active Directory, look up who Sally's manager is, and pings them a message in Slack to say, hi Dave, Sally's doing something really peculiar. Do you know about this? And in this particular example, he doesn't know about this, and the action he decides to take is to revoke access, which he does. We then update the ticket in Zendesk, fire a message into Okta, which is our identity management system in this example, which in turn revokes access to all the platforms that Sally has access to. Now, obviously, there's different business rules we can apply to this to apply to your particular use case. Things like, well, what if her manager doesn't answer the question? What if he's on holiday, etc., etc. But let's imagine he was paying attention and he did press this button. You could see how we could get out of a tricky situation in a threat environment very quickly. So typically, from Dave pressing that revoke access to Okta doing its doing is a couple of seconds. So we've immediately stopped that security incident happening. You can see how powerful this starts to become. Benefits of our approach. So it's low cost, believe it or not. This stuff doesn't cost the earth. And it's actually enabled you as businesses to get the most out of the platforms that you utilize today. There's less risk for software as a service projects. There's repeatable processes, so if something goes wrong or something isn't right, we change it once and it's corrected across the business. We can ultimately do more with less in terms of resource because we don't need as many people to deliver the service that we do today. And actually, we can deliver a better customer experience with less people. So you can either redeploy those in the business, you can get them doing more touchy-feely IT stuff or workshops, etc. But you don't need people just sat there answering the phone anymore. The other thing is this rapid deployment. So our approach is, instead of doing big bang integrations between system A and system B, we pick specific use cases, a bit like that box example, a sort of low-hanging fruit and stuff to go after first. And once we start connecting platforms to workflow, then the world is really your oyster and we can pretty much tackle any business process. In terms of customer value, it's fast, agile automation. We typically work in no more than a burst of about 5 or 6 weeks to deliver really major projects. The biggest one for me is the ability for IT to say yes again and become enablers. By implementing workflow automation, you can kind of change people's philosophy towards IT. IT can say, yes, let's get that platform in, let's put this workflow in place, as opposed to a million reasons why you shouldn't do it. It saves money because you can utilize the platforms you've got better, and also essentially redeploy resources you already have to do other things. So all the stuff Adam was talking about earlier, the sort of human stuff. So allow the automation to do the menial things for you and let you spend more time doing whatever your job is. Creates a flexible IT architecture and enables IT teams to be facilitators again. The other interesting thing here is by using workflow automation, it allows us to apply some of this cool technology that we talked about earlier. So we can start to put AI in decision making. We can start to create bots so that we can have a conversation essentially with the computer as our service desk to enable these automations to happen. We can truly leverage the power of the cloud, and what I mean by that is all too often companies just move their stuff to the cloud. I'm sure we've all been through Azure migration projects where we literally just moved our servers from our data center to Azure, and then we wonder why it's actually costing us more than it did when they were in the data center. Well, the answer is because the cloud isn't designed to be on all the time. We should spin stuff down when we're not using it, etc. So we can automate some of those actions. So if a server sat there doing nothing for a day, let's turn it off. Let's turn it back on when we need it again and save the money. Natural language understanding is a big one. So we put that into the mix, then we can start to have conversations with computers and then kick off automation back of it. And as you probably gathered, the innovation potential of this is endless. We can pretty much turn our hand to any business process and any business platform, which is what makes this so exciting for me. And a quote that we like, once we rid ourselves of traditional thinking, we can get on with creating the future, and I think that's what we do at Synaptek. Thank you very much. Adam, do we have any questions?
We do indeed. We have a handful of questions coming so far, so please continue to populate these as we look to answer them. I'll also give you the results of the polls as well in a second. But so I'll start the first question that's come in. I'm looking to drastically cut the number of platforms we use in half. What are the best details for me to put into a business case to pitch in my next board meeting?
Interesting one. So I assume you're looking to cut the number of platforms in half from a cost-saving perspective, or have you got a bit of sort of that platform overlap going on? But to answer your question, I would be looking at what those platforms are delivering, i.e. what platform is doing what for me. If you can then apply workflow between them, you can then start to see which platforms you can get rid of first. I think would be the best advice I can give you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, that one, and certainly sometimes it's difficult to answer these in too much detail, with one-way dialogues. But I'd certainly be interested in learning a little bit more about what the driver is behind that. As Carl says, are the platforms not talking to each other? I mean, one of the things that we do is what we call end-user workshops, and that's really getting to grips into how users are using applications. It may be that there's a crossover of functionality. That might be why you're looking to cull so many of the systems. It may be that the subscription costs into some of those platforms have got out of control. So we're certainly interested to see whether there's anything that we can help out with there. And also, as Carl says, if we can start to get some of these platforms talking to each other, that might be something of interest for you as well. So, happy to provide some more detail on that one.
Yeah, just something else I've thought of as well on the back of that question is, by using workflow automation, you can actually buy multiple platforms. So what I'm getting at is, instead of buying one platform that sort of does everything, by using workflow, you could actually buy 3 or 4 smaller platforms that do certain things really, really well and link them together with workflow. And we see that a lot in the IT space, especially around some of the big expensive products like ServiceNow. One of the things we've been doing is taking a product that's much cheaper and not as well, I'm struggling. stuff like Zendesk that isn't as well featured as ServiceNow, you can use some smaller platforms to get over those shortcomings, and it's actually cheaper, and you achieve the same outcomes by using multiple platforms as opposed to just one big expensive one. So that's something else to think about as well. So less platforms isn't always better. Does that make sense? Sorry, I got a bit.
Yeah, good. So I'll move on to the next question. So the next one, how do I sell the value of investing in technology and AI in a traditional business?
Sure. I think this one's easy. I think that when you start to look at specific use cases, so don't go into your board and say, hey, we should do AI because it's cool. I would look at some specifics. So go after some stuff today that's really painful within your business. And I mean, customer onboarding or user onboarding is a really good one. Figure out how you could apply AI to that solution to make it sing. And what you will tend to find is typically the technology will pay for itself, in my experience.
Cool. No, and I think some of the other elements you've covered off towards the back end of the presentation as well, around efficiency, cost savings, removing human error, etc. So yeah, all good. So is it vital, so next question, sorry, is it vital to know about AI and digital trends as a non-exec director? Digital transformation is a hot topic, but it's not really my forte. But do you think it's something I definitely need to know in today's boardrooms?
I'm biased, but I'd say absolutely. Not necessarily AI, because that's something very specific, but I think you have to be at least aware of what's going on digitally out there, because if you're not, somebody else will, and they'll use it as a competitive advantage to deliver a better experience than you can.
I think so, and I think one or two of the examples I use in my section around how businesses are built on technology, whether we like it or not, it is the cornerstone of everything now, the foundations. So I would say you certainly need to have a knowledge, and certainly around that boardroom there needs to be people with expert knowledge.
I think, to go back to that Steve Jobs quote, which I really like, decide what it is you're trying to deliver first, and then work backwards. So, you know, have an idea of what outstanding looks like in your mind, and then allow technical people to tell you how to get there. Is really good advice.
Great. One for you, Carl, right up your street. Can you connect to bespoke industry-specific platforms like Repeat?
Full disclosure, I have no idea what Repeat is, but yes, you can. There's multiple ways to connect to platforms. I know one of our customers, for instance, is using something that is mainframe based. It has no APIs whatsoever. It's about 25 years old. It's a green screen system, and we've used RPA, the robotic process automation stuff we talked about earlier, to automate some of their processes. So I'll have a look at Repeat after this call, and we can certainly get back to you, but I should think so, to answer your question.
Okay, here's an interesting one. Why isn't there enough executive education around digital transformation and technologies? That's a very good question.
I don't know, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is there is a place at the boardroom table for a CIO. Certainly in the larger businesses, there is a presence, but I think when you go into what you might call SMEs, there's not always necessarily a CIO or an IT director present on the board level. Certainly if I was running one of those organisations, I would make it an absolute necessity to have somebody with IT, a great degree of IT know-how at the on the board, because of all the reasons that we've already covered off. So yeah, I think execs absolutely have to be abreast of what's going on in the technology world. Otherwise, there is a real risk, as I've already said, of some of these organisations being left behind when some of the younger, hungrier, more forward-thinking competitors come along.
We all remember HMV, for instance.
There's many examples. Another one just popped in. Where do you recommend I start looking for information regarding board-level knowledge of digitisation?
Oh, that's a big question. I think the best place is, obviously I don't know your industry or your particular business, but start going to some of the technology conferences for the things that interest you or you think would be of benefit to your business. Obviously at vendor conferences you get a very vendor-specific view of the world, but I think if you go to those conferences with an open mind and just kind of absorb it and have a look at kind of trends and what's sort of hot at the moment, I think it helps shape your thinking, even if you don't particularly like that way a vendor is doing something. Even, you know, to use Zendesk as an example, their conference is really good to understand what outstanding customer service looks like. For instance.
Yeah, and this will sound really salesy, so I apologise for saying this up front. But there are organisations like ourselves that specialise in exactly this arena. So find a trusted partner, trusted organisation, somebody that you can ask, how do I and why should I and should I be doing this questions to, and use and abuse those kind of people. We have lots of customers that use us for this. We run our own what we call a virtual CIO service. We've got customers that get us in for attendance at boardroom meetings, to give some guidance and some direction to plug knowledge gaps. It's not that we're smarter than anyone else around the table. It's just that this is what we do for a living. So we've seen it all before. But as Carl says, there's lots of conferences. But I take the point. There's almost so many out there. It's picking and choosing which ones to attend. But yeah, it is a case of finding people that you can trust and work with. So again, more than happy to pick that conversation up separately and sort of help out on that front.
Again, as well, I'd reference that Steve Jobs quote. Decide what it is as a business you want to achieve, and then speak to the techies afterwards. Don't just think, well, I'll buy this piece of tech and it will solve my problems.
Don't deploy tech for the sake of deploying tech.
Yeah, salespeople will promise you the earth. They always do. But go with what I want to create is this, and it needs to look like this at the end, and then work backwards. Okay,
a tricky one coming up. Is there a platform that closely interfaces with an industrial automation system such as DCS or PLC SCADA system?
Do you know, it's really funny. So I started my life as a PLC engineer. I used to work on Siemens S7 controllers, so it's not as scary as the questions you might have thought, Adam.
Okay.
I don't know, actually, but I'll find out and get back to you. I should imagine so, and if there isn't, there'll be something in the works shortly. You know, typically your DCS/PLC stuff is a little bit behind the times. A lot of the stuff we're talking about is web-enabled, container-based automation. But if you need to get into sort of talking to things like Profibus, etc., there will be a way to do it. One of the things that springs to mind is a product called Wakato, which has something called an on-premise agent, which is basically a bit of software that you run internally that is then your interface between your on-premise systems and the container-based automation that lives in the cloud. There might be something to look at. But yeah, I'll have a look at that. It might be quite interesting.
Cool. So that's a pause on the questions for now. If anyone else wants to fire any more in, please do so. Just in the meantime, I'll just run through the responses to the poll. So again, thanks everybody for responding to these. So the first question we asked, does your business view technology as a competitive advantage? I'm relieved to say that 100% of you have said yes. So I shall move quickly on to question 2. Do you know how your business could benefit from automation? So 44% have said yes, and we have an automation strategy. 33% have said yes, but we don't have a strategy. So again, encouraging to see that automation is on the radar for the lion's share of you out there. 11% don't know how automation would benefit the business just yet. So again, sounds like it's something that's being considered, but just not quite hit the decision-making process just yet. And then the third question is platform sprawl an issue for your business? We've got 42% have said yes, 28% have said no, and 28% are not sure. So that may be that they're not in that area of the business that would be aware. So again, you know, as Carl's covered off, we see platform sprawl as a big issue in most of the organisations we go in there. So again, interesting that sort of 42% also are saying that it definitely is an issue for you. So final check of the questions. It doesn't look like there's any more that have popped in there. So mindful of time, we're just coming up to 1:45 the hour. So I guess if there's any other questions that do pop in after the session, then please, by all means, you'll have our contact details. Fire them across and we'll look to answer those. Again, as I said, there's one or two in there that I'd really like to dive a little bit deeper and get to understand a little bit more about the thinking behind the question. So again, be more than happy to take those offline. But other than that, thank you so much for spending this Wednesday afternoon with us. It is much appreciated. Thanks, Carl, for your demonstration and your input as well. And I wish you all a pleasant rest of your Wednesday. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.